Vine lingered in the dimly lit hospital hallway, her hands clenched tightly at her sides as she tried to steady herself. She had lost count of the hours she had spent here, watching and waiting. Each passing moment felt like an eternity, knowing Taehyung was just inside that room, a world away, yet completely unreachable. She wanted to be by his side, to hear him call her name even once, to see even a glimmer of recognition in his eyes, but it was clear that the man she loved was trapped in a memory that no longer included her. She took a shaky breath, about to leave, when the door to his room opened quietly. Out stepped the same woman named Suji. Vian's gaze flickered down her chest, tightening with an odd combination of resentment and sympathy. The pain was raw, but she knew this wasn't Suji's fault. Taehyung had mistaken her for someone important in his fractured memories, and now they were both caught in the aftermath. Suji's eyes met Vian's, and she hesitated before taking a step forward, her expression apologetic. Wine, right? Her voice was soft, and Wine could see a hint of discomfort in her gaze, as if she knew exactly the kind of turmoil Wine was in. Wine nodded, her throat tight. Yes. Suji looked down, her hands wringing nervously. I wanted to explain something. She began, her voice laced with uncertainty. She led her to a bench nearby. Taehyung, he doesn't actually know me, not in the way you might think. Van's brows furrowed in confusion, a glimmer of hope sparking in her heart. What do you mean? Taking a deep breath, Suji continued. The day of his accident, when they brought him into the ER, I was one of the nurses helping him. It was a mess. Doctors and nurses rushing around trying to stabilize him as he kept slipping in and out of consciousness. She paused, her eyes drifting to the floor as if the memory weighed heavily on her. He was so out of it, barely able to keep his eyes open. Suji murmured, her voice almost trembling. But through it all, he kept saying your name over and over, like it was the only thing grounding him. Vine's heart skipped a beat, the room blurring slightly as she blinked back, the tears threatening to spill over. He had been calling for her. Suji went on, her voice quiet. He was calling for you as he lay there, breathless and terrified. He wouldn't stop, even when we told him to rest, to save his energy. Her gaze softened, her eyes misting. He kept repeating, Ryan, like you were his lifeline. Ryan's hands trembled, her mind reeling, the image of Taehyung barely conscious, yet desperately trying to call her name. Filled her with both pain and a strange sense of relief. He had remembered her, even if only for a fleeting moment. Then Suji's voice broke through Ryan's thoughts. One of the doctors shouted for me, and Taehyung's gaze landed on me. He looked so lost, so frightened. In that moment he whispered my name before he blacked out completely. Ryan's heart sank. Everything made sense now. Taehyung's memory, fractured and incomplete, had latched on to the last image he saw, the nurse's face and the name he had heard just before slipping into darkness. So, Ryan said barely above a whisper, he remembers you because he heard your name. He thinks you're someone he loves. Suji nodded, her expression guilt ridden. In the morning, a senior doctor and I came to visit when you both were sleeping, and we saw him mumbling my name. At first, I didn't understand it. I thought maybe it was a temporary delusion, a side effect of the accident. But when he woke up, he looked at me like I was the one he cared for. And the doctors warned me before. They suggested if something like this happens, then I should go along with it to help him recover, to prevent any trauma or confusion from worsening his condition. Ryan's heart twisted painfully, the realization sinking in. This woman, someone who had no connection to Taehyung beyond that fateful moment, was now pretending to be the person he loved, all because of a tragic accident that had scrambled his memories. She was there by his side, as Vine herself had been all those years, comforting him, speaking to him gently, all for the sake of his fragile mental state. Vine looked up, her voice steadier than she felt. You're pretending to be his girlfriend for his sake. Suji's face crumpled with sympathy. I know it sounds ridiculous, but if I'm honest, I feel terrible about it. I don't know you, Ryan, but I know what this must be doing to you. I can see how much you care about him. She paused, her voice laced with regret. But I don't want him to suffer. The doctors believe that keeping up the illusion might help him recover until his memories come back. Pine swallowed hard, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions anger, hurt, sadness, love. They all mixed together in a storm she couldn't contain. But as she looked at Suji, saw the sincerity in her eyes, the way her hand shook just slightly, she realized something. Taehyung needed this. He needed stability, even if it was an illusion, and if this was the only way to help him. If playing along with the lie meant he could eventually find his way back to her, then maybe it was a price worth paying. With a deep, shuddering breath, Vine nodded. I understand, she said, her voice steady despite the tears welling up in her eyes. I'll go along with it. If it helps him, if it gives him some kind of peace, then I'll support you. Suji's eyes widened in surprise, a mixture of gratitude and guilt flashing across her face. Are you sure? A tear slipped down Vian's cheek, but she quickly brushed it away, her jaw clenched in resolve. Love makes you do things you never thought you'd do, Vian murmured, her voice soft yet resolute as she sat beside Yuji on that cold hospital bench. They had just rounded a corner on the busy street, the sky dimming to a dusky blue, when a motorbike tore through the intersection at full speed, too close, too fast. It was like something shifted in Taehyung's mind, the memory of flashing headlights, the piercing sounds of blaring horns, flooding back with a sudden suffocating intensity. The bike screeched to a halt, swerving past them, narrowly avoiding a collision. But in that split second, Taehyung's body froze, heart pounding as he instinctively reached out, trying to pull Suji to safety. The panic took over, his chest tightening with a surge of overwhelming fear, and just as he staggered back, he screamed, his voice echoing down the street. Before Suji could react, he collapsed, his body slumping against her as his world went black. At the hospital, doctors rushed him into the emergency ward, running tests and scanning for any signs of trauma. When Vine arrived, her heart thundered with dread. The fear she had buried for so long resurfacing. Her fingers clenched around her phone as she spoke to the doctor, her voice trembling. What happened? She stammered, panic creeping into her tone. The doctor gave her a steadying look. He fainted from a sudden stress response, likely brought on by a trauma or a memory. We are running tests, but it seems like he's reliving the accident in some way. You being here might help ground him if he regains consciousness. Vine swallowed hard, the words barely sinking in as she stood outside his room, her hand pressed against the glass, waiting with bated breath. She had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the possibility that he might finally remember her, but the reality was terrifying. Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours until a nurse emerged, gesturing for her to come in. Vine took a shaky breath and stepped into the room, her heart pounding as she walked up to his bedside. Taehyung's eyes fluttered open slowly, and for a moment he looked disoriented, his gaze drifting across the room until it landed on her, his brow furrowed, a flash of something familiar sparkling in his eyes. Wyan, he whispered, his voice hoarse, filled with a confusion that cut through the silence. Wyan froze, her breath catching in her throat, her eyes wide as she took a cautious step closer, hardly daring to hope. She whispered, her voice trembling as she searched his gaze, praying this wasn't just another cruel twist of fate. He blinked, his expression softening as the memory seemed to flood back piece by piece, the years they'd spent together, the nights they'd laughed until dawn. The promises they'd whispered in the quiet hours, they all returned vivid and undeniable. His hand reached out, finding hers, his grip weak but determined. Wine, he repeated, his voice breaking, laced with an emotion she hadn't heard in months. A small knowing smile touched her lips, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She seemed relieved, though there was a quiet resignation in her expression as well. She gave him a gentle smile, then turned to Ryan, a look of understanding passing between them. Take good care of him, Suji murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan looked at her, a soft gratitude shining through her face as she mouthed a silent thank you, her heart swelling with bittersweet ache for the woman who had stood by them both. Hey, you guys, this was it for the series. If you enjoyed it, then like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, and you can also follow me on Instagram at LustriousFFs. Also, if anybody has any angst ideas, then I'm in for it. You can comment down, and if I like it, I will, of course, make it in the future. So, yeah, this is it for today. I will see you in the next video. Till then, bye bye.